My name's Betty Ammon, and I've been working here at Missoula Public Library for 4.5 months, I guess. I work with Karen up in Children's Services. Before that, I was the young adult librarian at Pocatello Public Library in Pocatello, Idaho. And one of my colleagues there was Gail Sherman, who's the early childhood librarian. She still is. She's there, and I'm here. And we see each other frequently because we have a writing partnership, and we travel back and forth to continue writing. But enough about us. I'll tell you a little bit about Gail. Gail's background is in early childhood education. She taught school for a lot of years before she moved to Pocatello and became a volunteer at the public library there, and then eventually became the early childhood librarian and does all the early childhood planning, and that includes infant programming, toddler programming, and preschool programming. She's responsible for the outreach program the library has with all the daycare homes and daycares in Pocatello, and she plays tennis and speaks frequently. Some of you may have heard her last week or 2 weeks ago at the Montana Library Association conference, and she's gonna knock your socks off, right? Okay, here's Gail.
Thank you very much. The first thing I'd like to do is you have a handout there, and the first sheet is a two-sided sheet, and I will be going through pretty much in that exact order of what the books are. After about the fourth, maybe the sixth or seventh book, I'll get to that separate list, which is the bibliography. I'd like to just hit upon traditional storytelling a little bit. I'm not really going to do very much with it, but I'd like to talk a little bit about focusing on traditional literature. I know that for teachers, and let's see, how many of you are teachers in a classroom versus a media person? Okay, how many people are in media in a school? How many people are public librarians? That's interesting. You're all about a third and a third and a third. Especially classroom teachers, you know, you're in the classroom year after year after year, and you're doing some of the same things over and over again. And after a while, it gets a little tedious to be doing, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, or whatever, you know, the Mother Goose rhymes and so on. But as you know, in the primary grades, so much of what's written for children and sort of the exercises that traditional textbooks have you do are based on a knowledge that children have of folk tales and fairy tales and Mother Goose rhymes. And when I work with children in preschools, I every year have a little session where we do nursery rhymes and so on. And I am amazed at how many children continually have never heard Jack and Jill Went Up the Hill, or just any simple rhyme like that. They've never heard Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Certainly they've never heard of the Princess and the Pea. And so I think it behooves us to remember that it's a new generation of children that are coming up all the time. You may know those stories and be sick and tired of them, but they need to have those stories for part of their cultural background. And so the traditional literature that I'm going to hit upon are stories that are out now that have a new twist. First of all, for Mother Goose Collection, this is a Random House book that is excellent, and you may be aware of the poetry book also that that Arnold Lobel teamed up and did for older children. But this Mother Goose book is just an example of any old Mother Goose book. Then, Songs from Mother Goose is a very interesting book because there are about, I think there are 56 songs in here. And even me, who cannot play the piano at all, if I couldn't pick out these tunes and play them for an audience, I could certainly figure out what the tune was. All the tunes are traditional. But what makes this book very interesting is at the end of the book, each of the rhymes has its history is laid down here by Nancy Larink. And so this book is particularly good because you can tie it in with the Norton's Children's Literature book when she does poetry and talks about the history of Mother Goose rhymes, and using Mother Goose rhymes even in 5th and 6th grade classrooms because of the political relationship of the poems to what was going on. And so this book, though it's obviously appropriate for 2- and 3-year-olds and 1-year-olds, it can be used all the way up. And this is a fairly new book. Another book that is in the Mother Goose vein is this book, and I just brought a copy of a big book with me, Each Peach, Pear, Plum. And if you don't know this book, it has many Mother Goose rhymes, Mother Goose characters rather, that are hidden in the text. Each peach, pear, plum, I spy Tom Thumb. And Tom Thumb is in the picture. Do you see him up there in the tree? Okay. And as the story goes along, Tom Thumb, you pick up the first character in the cupboard, I spy Mother Hubbard. Do you see Mother Hubbard? You see her over here? Okay. All right. This is a book that kids love, but they're not going to enjoy the book unless they know who these characters are. And so this is a great book to use after you've introduced all these characters to children through a story hour or through a classroom experience of some kind. And then you can use this particular book. So there are a whole variety of different things that you can do. Another example is The Missing Tarts, in which the Queen of Hearts enlists the help of many other characters. Here's Jack and Jill, who's on the next page, and Old King Cole, and they all help her find the missing tarts. And so they all come together and go on this search. Now, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, I have a couple of books that tie in with that, just to keep you from getting stale. The traditional Goldilocks, I don't know if you know James Marshall's new books, but he's done some interesting twists on several of the stories from traditional literature. But I like what this particular one was said. This is a beginning to read book, okay? And lots of them aren't. But some picture books are much too hard. Some picture books are much too soft. But James Marshall's Goldilocks is just right. And it really is. It is not at all traditional. One morning, Goldilocks' mother sent her to buy muffins in the next village. You must promise not to take the shortcut through the forest, she said. I've heard that bears live there. I promise, said Goldilocks. But to tell the truth, Goldilocks was one of those naughty little girls who did exactly as she pleased. And the book goes on. And so any of his books that deal with those stories is along that same vein. A book that's been around for quite a while, I actually think it was published in the late 60s. Let me see, 76, well, is Written Turkles Deep in the Forest. And I don't know if you know this book. It's a wordless book, and it is a turnaround of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where the bear comes to the house and goes and tastes all the porridge and so on. And wordless books, I really have become very attached to them. I took a course a couple years ago on wordless books, and being aware that they were being used a lot for English as a second language or in foreign language classes or adult literacy classes and so on. And I was just fascinated to get my hands on every title I could and see really what was out there, because when they're reviewed, we don't hear about them all the time, and we don't see lots of lists, and they come out and you hear about 2 here and 3 there and so on. And to have the opportunity to have 20 people, you know, reaching out and pulling all the books that they knew about and then seeing them, it was a wonderful experience. And you'll be amazed. If you looked in your collection in the library, I'm sure they're not gathered in one area, but if you did gather them, there are many more than you actually thought existed there. And then this book by Jane Yolen, The Three Bears Rhyme Book, is very, very new. And what it does is it goes through, and she's written a poem about different events or items within the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and this one's about porridge. Okay, there are always 3 bowls and always 3 spoons, and Mama Bear humming her wake-me-up tunes. There are always 3 napkins, always 3 chairs, and great big yawns of breakfasting bears. As far or as old as I grow to be, that's what porridge will mean to me. And so Yolin has written something about the three bears walking, about a bouquet, rain, and so forth, using that story as a central theme. The frog prince that's listed on your bibliography there has beautiful pictures, but it is especially interesting because it is told from the frog's point of view, okay, which is a little bit different. In the end, a frog finds a frog and kisses her and wakes her up, and then this is the wedding. Lon Popo was the Caldecott Award winner for last year, and so this is Little Red Riding Hood, a Red Riding Hood story from China. So it is something which you can team up with the traditional story. And so into wolves, my mind thinks in themes, okay, because there's a lot of research out that shows that all story hours and programs in the library should be done on themes, because children are able to group them together and remember a lot more of what has happened, and to tie the stories together if there is something cohesive. If you have one book about circus and another book about elephants and then one about a kid on a bicycle, it's really hard for a child, especially for a young child, to gather all this information and remember them because they're separate. If you have a continuous theme throughout whatever your presentation is, it gives them a central focus. And in our library, with young kids, we always have what we call a reinforcement project. And I did this when I taught school too. There was always some kind of simple other activity that tied all the books together. So when a child goes home or meets his parents or her parents afterwards and they say, "What did you do?" Just looking at something and seeing a picture of a caterpillar, they say, "Oh yes, well we did caterpillars and butterflies today," or "We did cocoons." Just a little something there to spark their memory, but also then the books start staying together because they remember, "Oh yes, this fit into here and that led into that book." And so I tend to do workshops on the same idea. So this is my first wolf book, okay? Then I love this book, and I had to bring it, because if you don't know Mr. and Mrs. Pig's Evening Out by Brainier, it's really a wonderful book. Once upon a time, there lived a family of pigs. There was Father Pig and Mother Pig. And there were 10 piglets. They were called Sorrel Pig, Briny Pig, Hillary Pig, Sarah Pig, Cindy Pig, Toby Pig, Alan Pig, William Pig, Garth Pig, and Benjamin Pig. One evening, Mother Pig called her children to her as they were playing all over the house. "Now, piglets," she said, "your father and I are going out this evening." Now, I've started reading this because I want to talk a little bit about reading aloud. This is one of the things that I like to call attention to, because so often I see adults reading to children and going like this. And I don't expect you to sit still and pay any attention when you can't see the pictures. And I think that these kids ought to be beating each other up because they can't see the pictures now. Okay, just like if I turn like this and I block out someone's view, I can't expect people to be paying attention. And so I think the way you hold the book and the presentation that you have, the physical setup for the children is very important. And so, with the story of the true story of the Three Little Pigs by A. Wolf, which is a very new story, I'd like to point out just a little bit about reading aloud. When I work with children, I do sit down on a chair just as you're sitting on, or one that has an arm. And I turn my body sideways like this, but I always seat my audience of children within a 90-degree arc directly in front of me. Okay, and instead of turning the book so I can read, I turn my body. And I have children sit on the floor below me. There's no reason why they need chairs, because I want to be able to tilt the book so that their eyes can meet the page on a straight line. If you're reading to children and you're holding the book like this for your convenience, how can a kid on the floor or even a kid sitting on a chair really see these illustrations very well? Okay, so you really need to think about what children can see, all right? So when you're turning sideways like this, obviously my bad side is on my left. So I just always make sure and tell kids, well, you two are going to have to move over on this side a little bit, scoot over, okay? And they'll move over. And when you have the children, they know how you do it. And I have kids who insist on sitting on that side, whether they're 3-year-olds or 8-year-olds. Some of them will insist on sitting, and it's just very simple. When you decide you want to see the pictures, get up and move. Find a better place, okay? And then we just go on, all right? Now, I am right-handed, so I hold the book in my right hand, and I turn with my left. And the reason I do that is when I turn my pages, I want to be able to put my hand underneath and slide the page across. If you hold the book with your left hand, you have to, it's very hard to get the page apart over here, all right? So you're constantly reaching across your body here. And when I read, I'm always fixing the next page as I'm reading, okay? And that thing about blowing, that happens a lot with new books. It's hard to turn the pages lots of times. And if you do just blow, it separates them, and then you can slip your fingers in there. But I like this because this is comfortable. And I can rest my elbow on my hip or on the arm of a chair. If you don't play a lot of tennis like I do, and you're holding a book out here, you'll find that your hand will start to go like this, you know, it's going back and forth and so on. But eventually it steadies. But even I like to rest my hand. It's just more comfortable that way. And then my left arm is relaxed. I'm not forever over here reaching across and so on. So I really think, because we read from left to right, that even if you're left-handed, if you can possibly change and read on this side of you, it is helpful. It's more comfortable, and there's less distraction with this stuff going up here all the time. It's, you know, it's just very subtle over here on the side. Well, if you don't know this story, it's the story of the true story of the 3 little pigs, and I will just start it part of the way. The wolf needs a cup of sugar for his dear old granny's birthday cake, and so he goes to his neighbor's. So I walked down the street to ask my neighbor for a cup of sugar. Now, this neighbor was a pig, and he wasn't too bright either. He built his whole house out of straw. Can you believe it? I mean, who in his right mind would build a house out of straw? So, of course, the minute I knocked on the door, it fell right in. I didn't want to just walk into someone else's house, so I called, little pig, are you in? No answer. I was just about to go home without a cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake when my nose started to itch. She has a cold, I forgot to tell you. And I felt a sneeze coming on. Well, I huffed, and I snuffed, and I sneezed, a great sneeze. You're so far away, some people, I don't know if you can see that. And you know what? The whole darn straw house fell down, and right in the middle of the straw was the first little pig, dead as a doornail. He'd been in the house the whole time. It seemed like a shame to leave a perfectly good ham dinner lying there in the straw, so I ate it up. Think of it as a big cheeseburger just laying there. I was feeling a little bit better, but I still didn't have my cup of sugar, so I went to the next neighbor's house. This neighbor was the first little pig's brother. He was a little bit smarter, but not much. He had built his house out of sticks. I rang the bell on the stick house. Nobody answered. I called, Mr. Pig, are you in? He yelled back, go away, Wolf, you can't come in. I'm shaving the hairs on my chinny chin chin. I had to grab the doorknob when I had just grabbed the doorknob when I felt another sneeze coming on. I huffed and I snuffed, and I tried to cover my mouth, but I gave a great sneeze. And you're not going to believe this, but this guy's house fell down just like his brother's. When the dust cleared, there was the second little pig, dead as a doornail, wolf's honor. Now, you know food will spoil if you just leave it out in the open. So I did the only thing there was to do. I had dinner again. Think of it as a second helping. I was getting awfully full, but my cold was feeling a little better, and I still didn't have that cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. So I went to the next house. This guy was the first and second little pig's brother. He must have been the brains of the family. He'd built a house out of bricks. I knocked on the brick house. No answer. I called, Mr. Pig, are you in? And do you know what that rude little poker answered? Get out of here, wolf. Don't bother me again. Talk about impolite. He'd probably had a whole sack full of sugar, and he wouldn't even give me one little cup for my dear old sweet granny's birthday cake. What a pig. I was just about to go home and maybe make a birthday card instead of a cake when I felt my cold coming on. I huffed and I snuffed and I sneezed once again. Then the third little pig yelled, "And your old granny can sit on a pin." Now, I'm usually a pretty calm fellow, but when someone talks about my granny like that, I go a little crazy. When the cops drove up, of course, I was trying to break down the pig's door. And the whole time I was huffing and puffing and sneezing and making a real scene. The rest, as they say, is all history. The news reporters found out about the two little pigs I had for dinner. They figured a sick guy going to borrow a cup of sugar didn't sound very exciting, so they jazzed it up with a story about all that huff and puff and blow your house down. And they made me the big bad wolf. That's it, the real story. I was framed. But maybe you could lend me a cup of sugar. Well, this book obviously could be used with third, fourth, fifth graders, eighth graders even. But for younger children, if you use it at the end of having let everybody know about the three little pigs, because you will be amazed, there will be some in your room who've never heard of them, then they understand the humor of this book. If you don't know that story, then you don't get the humor. It is sort of interesting. We have a lot of stories coming out now that are along this vein, which have a new twist. Now, The Gunny Wolf is a story that I do for traditional storytelling, and I will just tell a little bit of it right now. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived with her mother at the edge of the forest. And every day her mother warned her, "Little girl, never, never go into the forest." And every day, little girl promised that she wouldn't. One day, the mother had to go into the village to do some shopping. But before she left, she said to little girl, "Do not go into the forest." And little girl promised. But her mother had hardly left when the little girl saw some beautiful white flowers growing along the edge of the forest. And so she ran over there, and she picked those flowers for her mother. Kumquakiwa, kumquakiwa. And when she was finished, she looked further into the forest, and she saw some beautiful orange flowers. And she ran quickly into the forest, and she picked those flowers too. Kumquakiwa, kumquakiwa. Now she was quite pleased with her bouquet and decided that she would look a little further, and she did see, right in the middle of the forest, some beautiful purple flowers. So she ran in there very quickly, and she picked those flowers. Kumquakiwa, kumquakiwa. When up rose the gunny wolf. "Little girl, why for you move?" "I no move." "Then you sing that gootin' sweetin' song again." Kumquakiwa, kumquakiwa. And the gunny wolf nodded and nodded and fell fast asleep. And little girl got up and ran through the jungle. the gunny wolf. Honk-a-cha, 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 honk-a-cha. Little girl, why for you move? I know move. Then you sing that gootin' sweetin' song again. Kum-qua-ki-wa, kum-qua-ki-wa. And the gunny wolf nodded and nodded and fell fast asleep. Little girl got up and ran through the jungle. Help me. Pip-pat, 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 help me. Pip-pat, 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 pip-pat. And up rose the gunny wolf. Honk-a-cha, 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 honk-a-cha. Pip-pat, 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 pip-pat. Honk-a-cha, 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 honk-a-cha. Little girl, why for you move? I know move. Then you sing that gootin' sweetin' song again. Kum-qua-ki-wa, kum-qua-ki-wa. And the gunny wolf nodded and nodded and fell fast asleep. And the little girl got up and she ran into the jungle. Pip-pat, 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 pip-pat. Honk-a-cha, 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 pip-pat, 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 pip-pat. Honk-a-cha, 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 pip-pat, pip-pat, honk-a-cha, honk-a-cha, pip-pat, pip-pat. And the little girl runs out of the jungle, pip-pat, pip-pat, and she gets back home again, okay? Now, I'm going to introduce you to some books that will give you more specifics about traditional storytelling. The most important thing is that before you start, whatever the story is, you choose a story that you really like. And I like that book in particular. It is a story that is very easy to follow along. All these books will recommend that you do not memorize any of the text. What I do, and this is sort of a combination of what I learned in all these books, is to write down an outline, just strictly an outline, and only memorize the part of the story that has to be repeated over and over again. Kumka, kiwa, and pipat, pipat, okay, and so on. And just write the sequential order down. Because if I told that story again right now, I would tell it differently, okay? The story is part of me. Every time you tell it, it comes out a little different. It may be that you get distracted by someone in the audience and you do something funny, or you may, like I can remember when I was thinking about what I was going to do next, and when I had picked up the first two flowers, I couldn't remember the color of the second flower that I said that I picked up, but I knew I hadn't said purple, so that's why I said purple for the third flower. But I can't ever remember saying purple flower before. It's always been, you know, orange, white, pink, red, those kinds of colors. But I thought, oh goodness, I don't know what I said. The problem is if you memorize something and then you forget where you are, you're in real trouble, okay? Because people just go like, and they just can't improvise at that point. This book, the Storytelling, Art and Technique, now this is the second page that you have there. Okay, has a lot about specifics about learning stories, but one thing that is so wonderful about it is it has a whole section on storytelling in special settings. For instance, hints on storytelling in the outdoors, what to do at family story hours, storytelling for infants and toddlers. There was one here, storytelling to emotionally disturbed children, storytelling with impaired hearing, and so on and so forth. And so this, if you have children with special needs, this book is especially helpful. Okay, the second book on your list is really the book that I used the most when I started. And as you knew from the introduction, I had no professional training. I started working at the library. I had taught for about 8 years out of the 11 prior to that. If you put all the time together, I had some babies in there and stuff and took time off and whatever. And when I was working at the library as a volunteer, there was a woman who was there as an early childhood librarian, and she was there the first year I worked as a volunteer. And at the end of that first year, she was given a job because they were moving, and they offered me the job at the library a year before it actually started. And this woman studied with Bauer, who was the author of the next 3 books. Yeah, there. And so I just went in and I watched her. My kids were in her story hours, and I went in and I watched her some, and she told me about this book, and it just gave me lots of good ideas. And I watched her use props, and I just, you know, I saw what she did, and I copied a few of them, and from there I just sort of went on. And that's what you can do. You can do exactly what I'm doing now, you know, within not very long, because you're going to have the stuff to start with. Anyway, this book is really a good help for just traditional things, giving you ideas, how to remember things. I remember when we were getting ready to do our book talk lecture at Montana Library Association a couple weeks ago, we were looking at a videotape, and the woman was talking about, oh, she memorizes the book talk and she tapes it up on the mirror and she speaks it out when she's brushing her hair and stuff. And Betty and I were horrified. I mean, it sounded like so much work. It was incredible. And that's the way I think of the storytelling too. The most important thing is that you choose a story that you're comfortable with. Okay, and in the beginning, you don't want to choose something with a lot of characters, and you don't want to start using a lot of different voices. For 2 characters, that's fine. You can use voices, but boy, you really got to be pretty talented and have some kind of drama background if you're going to work with more than 3. It just gets confusing because you do get distracted by things in the audience. And so, and kids know what's going on. You can have a pause before a different person speaks, or change position, and all those kinds of hints are in these first 2 books. The Bauer books, her first one was Handbook for Storytellers, is filled with lots of ideas, lots of the things that I have here. Some of the things I have here aren't in here. She has magnetic stories that are, why, every time I open this book, there's never an illustration. Though the book, well, this is like using an overhead. She has a whole chapter on using an overhead, and I'm going to be using one. And so this book is chock full of ideas, all right? This was her first book. The second book is the same way, but this particular book was done more on themes, okay? She has a whole section in here about storytelling with the basic things on book talk, presenting poetry, games, and so forth. But there's lots of ideas in here, all themes, okay, for storytelling programs, for things to use in classrooms and in libraries. And then her last book, Celebrations, has, I can't remember, 16 book programs are in here. And this book is intended for 4th through 8th graders, okay? It is not for young kids. And there are selections, like there are prose selections and poetry selections, and then a treat that you can have that goes on with that story program. And if you're in a classroom, a bulletin board thing that you can do, and a creative writing activity, and so on. And some of the chapters are the art of art, B is for baseball, calendar day, gone fishing, a whole thing on fishing, National Nothing Day, Jewish humor, Pygmania, terrific turtles. I'm looking at some of the more interesting ones here. Tantalizing television. Okay, and so this is a book really for children in upper elementary and middle school years. I really like this book by Ross called Storyteller, and has a lot of material for upper elementary and junior high. And when Betty and I taught children's literature at Idaho State University, we had a woman who did a story out of here. It was terrific. It was called Paco, and I don't see where the beginning of it is, but it is a story about a house in Los Angeles, and it really deals with today. And there's more sort of original work in this book, or stories that he has gotten, that Ross has gotten from other people, but really would have appealed to junior high and even some high school kids. And that presentation was really terrific. And so there is a lot out there for upper elementary, junior high, and maybe some high school stuff. So if you're working with those kids, those are some of the books that have that. This story activities book here is a pretty recent book. It really is geared to classrooms, though, and it has. I'm a literature-based reading person, so it sort of worries me, but the whole back of the book has appendices like the matrix of skills and activities, and you know, all those kinds of things that we had in our education classes if you're teachers like me, and some of that is, you know, that worries me, but the material in here for storytelling prior to that is comfortable for me, okay? Along with that, but for younger children, is this flannel storytelling book, which has some text in it, okay, and then all the pattern pieces. Now, on the first sheet of your handout, you'll notice at the very bottom of the first page and then on the second page, there are some asterisks preceding some of the stories I'm going to be talking about. And all of those are those patterns and the crib sheets for those stories now have been copied and are here at Missoula Public Library. So if you want those patterns, you can go to the children's department and ask to Xerox those. So if it has a star, the material is upstairs. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. I mean, if someone else has done something and shows it to you, you might as well use it, okay? I like these particular patterns. There are two books that Anderson has written and the Dennison Company has put out, and I am not a fan of those stories because so many of them are really didactic stories, and my basic use of storytelling and props is one, to do traditional literature, okay, or then to use fine children's literature and do other presentations of those stories, and that's what the emphasis will be on. And then the last book there, Story Programs, a source book of materials, is just a very similar book with patterns and is geared for preschool years. Charlotte Huck. This is a variation of Cinderella. Okay, and this book I just brought strictly as a book that really spoke to me, that I would be willing to spend the time to do like I did the Gunny Wolf. And it could be done with a couple props. You could do it with a ring and a little tiny spinning wheel and so on and so forth, or you could do it without any props. I do the Gunny Wolf sometimes with silk flowers, and I have the flowers out on the ground beforehand, and I go and I pick it up. For younger kids, they like that because our kids are so visual, you know, with television, that it's a shame, but for some kids, they need some extra help there. But this is a book that really spoke to me, and so I'm just using this as an example. It may not speak to you, but this is one that I will spend some time doing. And then one more source of a book that I thought had some excellent stories is Diane Good's Book of American Folk Tales and Songs. And I actually went ahead and Xeroxed several of the stories I was interested in. This book has some fine selections to do in the very beginning, because many of the stories are short, like the knee-high man here. Whoops, that's okay. It's just those 3 pages. And then Davy Crockett Meets His Match is also quite short. I think that's the end of it. Yeah, that was the end of it right there. Okay, so there's just some very short stories. And so if you're going to do that, if you're interested in traditional storytelling, start with something short, okay? And these are just some ideas. Princess Furball is quite a bit longer. Okay, I use a lot of pop-up books with audiences. They're real successful. But when I read a story, I rarely change any word. I mean, I try not to change any word. Sometimes if I can't see it, or I'm just I'm reading it along because I've read it so often and it's just sort of coming out, and now and then some other word slips in there. But this book, The Haunted House book by Penwinkowski, is a book that I have done my own story to, just because it's such a wonderful pop-up book, and the story that was written here was way too short. Okay, so I go on a tour of the Haunted House book with kids instead. And over the years, having done the outreach program for 12 years, I have kids that, this is the most popular book of any book I have done. I have kids in the grocery store who came up and said, "You did the Haunted House book." Years later, you know, they'll be 8 or 9 years old, and I said, "Yeah, well, what school?" And they'll tell me the name of a school that they were in when they were 4, you know, or something like that. And this book is still in print, but for pop-up books in general, you can't count on them having a long shelf life. They may only be printed once, and they're available, and then they're gone. Okay, like for this one, I pull the ghost and I say, okay, now would you like to get up on the bed? You can take a nap. And kids will go, oh, there's a ghost. I don't see a ghost. You know, and then we go through this thing, there's a ghost. There's no ghost there, you know, and then you know, there's a ghost, you know, and you can milk it as long as possible, okay, until you have to give up. Oh, I didn't know there was a ghost there, and they love it, okay. But if you do find a good pop-up book, and I personally go and look for them all the time. Oh, there we have a pig. How silly of me. There we have a pat, though. Okay? Buy them when you see them, because you may go back the next day and it was the last one and it's gone, and you may never see the book again. This is one that is not on your list, which is There Was an Old Lady, and it's Who Swallowed a Fly, right? And it's brand new. It's by Bantock, B-A-N-T-O-C-K. It was published by Viking. Oh, gosh, it was $7.95. Oh, well. And let's see. Yeah, it just came out in 1990. I have a friend in a bookstore, and so she saves me these things. And I go in, and she says, have you seen this? And I haven't. But I do have a flannel story of the old lady who swallows a fly. And I thought this was so perfect that I bought it and will use, of course, with the flannel story. The question is, do we keep these in our collection, or do I just use them for story hour? My personal collection is better than the library's collection, okay? The ones that we buy at the library say desk on them, and we usually do not circulate them. However, because it's a public library, and we have kids who beg for one, if a parent is there, then we will check it out. But no, it's not on the shelf routinely. And that's true for books with flaps and so forth also, because they just won't stand up, you know. It doesn't matter whether the kid's 3 or whether the kid's 8. You could have 2 8-year-olds, and one kid grabs it because, you know, what's the difference? The 8-year-old's stronger than the 3-year-old. It breaks faster, you know. And so age really doesn't have any, it doesn't help you, because kids just get stronger and they want it just as much. Okay. Have you seen my cat? I try to use any kind of book that gives you the opportunity to have children participate. I am always trying to get them to do things with me. I don't want them to look like a bunch of dead corpses out there. I mean, I get hysterical when a teacher comes in and sits the kids down, or somebody says, now everybody put your hands in your lap. Oh, no, guys. Okay, everybody, hands on your head. Let's go. Okay, guys, shake your arms out. Wiggle your bottoms. You know, let's do something so that they are human, because there are people who will have them sit like this. And how can you enjoy that? Okay, I want everybody to put their feet flat on the floor right now. You may not cross your legs for the rest of this program. That's an hour and 15 minutes. Could you do that? I mean, that's ludicrous. That's the same thing like fold your arms, okay? That's not real comfortable to listen to a story sitting in one way. Relax, okay? I think my point is made. Okay, so with something like this, have you seen, and he's going around, this is not my cat, and the little boy asks, have you seen my cat? And then I'd get them, by this time they'd be saying, this is not my cat, because it's the same refrain all the time. And whenever you have a story that permits you to do that, take advantage of that. It keeps them on their toes. It keeps them sort of riveted to the story. I want as much participation. I don't want them to be quiet. I want them to be jabbering, or, you know what comes next? Shh, 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 don't tell, you know, and stuff like that. It's okay if it's noisy, okay? It's okay in a school, just like it's okay in a public library. Now we need to have a little noise here. Thump, thump, rat-a-tat-tat, okay? Now, when we were at Betty's house this morning, I was getting a few things. Would you do that for me? You'll be the rat-a-tat-tat. Okay? Now we did this, but I don't remember how it worked best. Would you be my thump thump? You guys are all thump thumps, okay? You can say it with your voice, and you guys are all rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tats. Now, before we do that, though, let's step back here. I did this with my infant program. I have a book babies program, and we all sit in a circle like a human playpen, parents sitting Indian style with your knees touching, so that the infants who are from birth, or they're really pretty much from 3 weeks, no one's come younger, from 3 weeks to 24 months, but they cheat and bring them at 26 months and stuff because they don't want to stop. They're contained within the circle. They're either on their lap or they're roaming around, whatever's happening. And so I did this, and one side of the parents was thump thump and the other side was rat-a-tat-tat. And what works so well with babies, and the storytelling part is about 20 minutes or so, is all the unison stuff. So anything that you can get where the parents are chiming in and stuff works well. Okay, so when half of the room is saying thump, thump, and the other side goes rat-a-tat-tat, you'll have little infants that are like this because the sound is here in unison, and then it's there, and it's, it's this real auditory amazement to them, and so this works well too. And you could do this with kids. You could have cards. I'm going to show you the book just so you can appreciate this, and then we're actually going to read it off of the overhead. We'll just do part of it, but you can see as it goes along that the text gets larger and larger as this parade is going by. And right in the middle it gets quite big. And I duplicated the same thing on the overhead so that you get the idea that it gets louder and louder and louder. And I've done this with groups of kids, and they really like it because they get the idea of the band coming closer and then fading. Okay. If I put it there, I'll leave it here. Okay. Can you read that? Let's just go down to maybe here. Okay, we'll start here. Let's see, you're my rat-a-tat-tat. Oh yeah, you're my rat-a-tat-tat, sorry. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, thump, 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 thump. Distant drums, chirping horns, rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. Big as ants, loud as crickets. Pounding drums, squawking horns, rat-a-tat, helper. Big as crickets, loud as birds. Piping flutes, purring drums, rat-a-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. Big as birds, loud as lions. Festive colors, flashing brass, rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. Thunder coming, louder, getting louder, thump, 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 thump. Marching band, all in tune, rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. Okay, so you get the idea. It just goes louder and louder. Obviously, everybody needs practice, including me. Let's see. For Tacky the Penguin, this is a great book. And this is one of the ones that has an asterisk, right? So it's upstairs. I just thought it was such an easy play for kids to do that they would just love it. So I wrote it out with a narrator, all right? And kids, and even though there are 5 penguins, I think, and Tacky, of course, is the most unusual penguin, but it doesn't matter. If you have a bunch of kids, you could have 10 penguins in one Tacky, and everybody gets a chance to play Tacky sometime. And there are only 3 hunters, but who cares if there are 8 hunters in your group? And I'll just introduce you to the story because it really is cute. There once lived a penguin. His home was a nice, icy land he shared with his companions. His companions were named Goody, Lovely, Angel, Neatly, and Perfect. His name was Tacky. Tacky was an odd bird. Every day, Goody, Lovely, Angel, Neatly, and Perfect greeted each other quietly and politely. Tacky greeted them with a hearty slap on the back and a loud, "What's happening?" Goody, Lovely, Angel, Neatly, and Perfect always marched 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Tacky always marched 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 6, 0, 2 1/2, 0. His companions were graceful divers. Tacky liked to do splashy cannonballs. Goody, lovely, angel, neatly, and perfect also sang pretty songs like Sunrise on the Iceberg. Tacky always sang songs like How Many Toes Does a Fish Have? Tacky was an odd bird. Well, he goes on, and they hear the hunters coming, and the hunters all have this chant. We're gonna catch some pretty penguins, we'll march them with a switch. We'll sell them for $1 and get rich, rich, rich. And so on and so forth. And you can make up a song for how many toes does a fish have, and or a chant or whatever you want, and so on. But there aren't very many lines, and even preschool kids can do this, though third graders could do this as a play also. And it is a good example of creative dramatics, but it can be as creative as you want. It could have no script, or you could just be the narrator, or whatever. Now, Possum in the House is a book from Australia. And my list of things that I have are, this looks really good on the video, doesn't it? I keep turning around. We didn't think about that before. Okay. Let's see, we'll just do a couple of these. Would you like to do cornflakes? You're just going to make a noise. Let's see. Something lively. We need normally a shirt would rip, the water in the toilet, you'd hear it go splashing, the toothpaste would go, and the pots and pans, you're close, what can I say, okay? Now, these are going to be obviously in the wrong order, because I've never done this in the right order, but let me see. The cornflakes was first. I did it right, okay? We'll just do the first 2 pages here. Now, this story has a refrain, and it's help, help, screamed Dad. Oh, drat, yelled Mom. The thing that's confusing is on the very next page, they reverse, and so it's help, help, screamed Mom. Oh, drat, yelled Dad. And so if you were doing this with a group, I would just edit the book and keep it in the same refrain, okay? Because kids are going to get confused. Who's going first now, Dad or Mom, and what are they saying, and so on. But it has a real chant to it. And so we're first going to have cornflakes, and the cornflakes are going to go crunch, crunch, and you can crunch them if you want, okay? And then we're going to go into the kitchen, and the pans are going to go, let's see, Possum in the kitchen, Screech the Possum. Wait a second. Did it say clatter, clatter? Clatter, clatter. Well, it doesn't go clatter, clatter. You and I know it, just like pigs don't say oink, oink. They go, so these pans are going to go, okay, that's bang, bang or something. Okay. There's a possum in the house, and he's hiding in the pantry. Help, help, screamed Dad. Oh, drat, yelled Mom. Crunch, crunch went the cornflake. Screech, screech went the possum as he ran into the kitchen, right? There's a possum in the kitchen, and he's hiding in the cupboard. Oh, drat, screamed Mom. Oh, help, help, screamed Mom. Oh, drat, yelled Dad. Clatter, clatter. Oh, really clatter them. Come on. Went the pot. Screech, screech went the possum. Okay, so you can have a kid who's always the possum, You could have a kid who's always the mom, a kid who's always the dad, and so on and so forth. You don't need to make a big deal out of this, but if you read it over and over again, it's the kind of book that has this rhyme and rhythm, and kids want to hear it again. And so by the time you've read it the 3rd time, they know what's going to happen. And they're really going to crunch the cornflakes and crash the pans together and scratch the record with their fingernails and rip the shirts apart and stuff like that. Okay, the next part I'm going to do is using story cards, what I call flip cards. And the first book that I have here is The Snow by John Birmingham. For most of these things, I Xerox the actual picture. And then the reason I did this book as a flip card book is the book is very small, and I needed it for an infant and toddler class, and it was too small to use with a group of kids. So I blew it up, okay? And I use, for all my coloring, I use a Crayola 64 colors, because if you mix them together, you can really get the coloring of the book the closest to the book as possible. And I always try to make the copy exactly like the book, and I try to always have the original book with me. I like to have the book. The book came first, and this is an extension, okay? This is not something I invented. This is just another way to look at the book. One nice thing about book cards is it allows you with 5, 6-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 7-year-olds to do sequential order and so on. And they can handle the materials afterwards. They can put the cards in different order, make up a totally different story. It doesn't matter. But I think that all of these materials that you make should be available to kids, and should be, if you've used them with a lot of kids in a library or in a classroom or in a media center, that after the kids really know it, it should be, I keep them in envelopes and stuff, and then just put them in a file so that kids can put their hands on and use the things also. And so what I do is on the back of each one is a number of the card and the text that goes with the card. So when I sit, it's there, and I can just read off the back side of it. This particular set of cards, I didn't have very much plastic covering, and so I only covered one side. I'll never do that again. Cover both sides. It really makes them last longer. Another variation of that is for Pat the Bunny, another situation where the book was very small. I did it in cards, so with my infant programming, I could pass the cards around. So we start off with the first page, but then when we Pat the Bunny, that I could pass it to a parent on this side. And so babies would be having the tactile experiences, and it went around. And then for the next one, when you play peekaboo with Paul, now this is not on your list, okay, this, because I made this after that, okay, and then I can pass that one around. For smelling the flowers, you know all those perfume things you get in magazines? You just make holes in the thing, and see, I've made little pockets here on the back side. And then you just ignite it. At least that's what I call it. You just pull that strip. The strip is, oh, this one has, no, it hasn't been pulled. Here it goes. And then I just insert that into the back of that page. And then when they sniff the flowers, and then it smells like whatever that perfume is. This is just strictly, it's a mirror, a locker mirror. You know, they aren't glass, and they don't cost very much. Sorry. And Daddy's scratchy face and so on, and I just pass these around. Okay. Yes. It's called Pat the Bunny by Kundardt, Kunhardt. It's an old book. I think every baby should have this book. Okay, have an experience with it. A variation of, I do a lot of stories that have songs with it, and for Old MacDonald had a farm. I use this in my 2-year-old program, can you tell? Little notes to myself in there. I have done the same kind of thing, copied the pictures of the different animals when you sing, and then I've just put them on this core board, and I pass them around, and we don't do it in a traditional way. I let everybody decide who wants to be a horse. I put the pieces out. Okay, everybody choose an animal and go sit by the animal. You may have 1 horse one time, or you may have 10 horses and chickens, and then they make the correct sound when it's their time. And then you can say, okay, everybody be a new animal, and so on. So I just have the animals and the people that I use here. When I do stories, sometimes I use this. These dolls are, and you can get eggs that are this shape now, and so forth. These Russian dolls are helpful, and sometimes I don't put all my books out, though usually they're all put out left to right, and they know exactly what's going to happen. But sometimes I'll hide my stories in a bag, and they won't know if we're having 2 stories or 10 stories, and so we're having the number of stories as are in here. And so this is just a technique which you use, and so then, okay, let's see, and when I'd be finished with the first book, the first one would sit there, let's see if there's another story after this, or if that was the last one. Oh, there's going to be another story, okay, and you can get, so many of these now are seasonal, you can get Santa Clauses and stuff like that, and so they can be used with all kinds of stories. This is a flannel story that I've done, and I have used the pictures from one book, with a little help, I cut out all the pictures and have covered them with a clear plastic on one side, leaving an outer edge. Okay, there is always an edge on it. You can see the edge better on this side. Okay, and then I glue the felt on the back and put the number where it goes on. And this is a cumulative story. It just goes straight through. I always have crib sheets. Okay, here's my crib sheet. This is the book I ripped apart. And I've typed the text in a shortened form right here because, I have 50, 60, at least 50 or 60 different stories, and I may do one 30 times, but I may not use it for 24 months again, and I just want to be, oh yeah, one morning the king and queen and the little prince came to visit me, okay, but I wasn't home. On Tuesday morning, the king, the queen, the little prince, they were already up there from the time before, and the knight, ooh, came to visit me, but I wasn't home. On Wednesday morning, the king, and now kids are helping me, the queen, the little prince, the knight, and the royal cook came to visit me.